This is the Detroit Sports Podcast Network.
So what does the most accurate college football preview of the last few years have to say about the 2019 Wolverines? Find out that and more on this week's episode of Michigan Podcast next.
But there's going to be one team that's going to play solely as a team. No man is more important than the team. No coach is more important than the team. The team, the team, the team.
Looks deep for Anthony Clark. Waits for it. Yes, caught.
This is no time for that. In the pocket and a sack. Tim Jamison. Brady gets terrific.
Throws it, get it, touchdown, Knight again. Schultz, just before Brazil got him, and a leaping interception by Woodson.
Harbaugh back to throw over the middle, caught by Collier at the 5 on his feet, touchdown Michigan. On its way. It's good.
He's 5'7", 179 pounds, a junior at Michigan. But Jamie Morris packs a wallop, and he delivers for Bo Schembechler.
And here's your first play. Pressure coming, sack. It is Glenn Steele, number 81, who fought his way through the traffic.
Option. And Robinson calls his own number, and he's going to score. Oh, an easy touchdown for Robinson and Michigan.
Win it. We're going to win the championship again because we're going to play as a team. And when we play as a team and the old season is over, you and I know it's going to be Michigan again. Michigan.
Go Blue, I'm Steve Deace, and welcome to this week's episode of Michigan Podcast. We're going to be joined by the man behind Pick 6 Previews, which has been rated the most accurate college football preview, yes, ahead of Phil Steele's, Athlon's, etc., over the last few years. And we're going to find out what he thinks about the 2019 Wolverines and the college football season in general, coming up a little bit later on in this week's episode. But I want to begin this week with something I don't know that I can ever remember saying. You know, when Bo Schembechler left in 1989, the 24-hour sports news cycle was just becoming a thing. When Gary Moeller took over in the early 1990s, we still didn't have social media. Heck, we didn't have social media really en masse until Lloyd Carr left in 2007. So perhaps it's not a fair question to ask historically, given those factors. I mean, I have no idea what could have come out of Bo Schembechler's mouth if he was being monitored 24 hours a day, and it could end up as a tweet, okay? I'm pretty sure nothing still would have come out of Lloyd Carr's mouth. He didn't like saying much, regardless of the media environment. But, hey, have you ever remembered a Michigan football coach doing as much as they possibly can to dial up expectations on his own team, as Jim Harbaugh is doing right now for the Michigan Wolverines? And I know there's this notion out there that Jim Harbaugh runs his mouth and then his team never delivers. The reality is he hasn't said much of anything the last couple of years. He's been far more willing to share his thoughts this offseason. But for the past couple of years, he really hasn't said much at all. And he's never really been one to talk up his team. You know, he's been dialing down expectations ever since he came here. He's been putting the team in the preseason submarine ever since he came here. Well, now we had this week yet another podcast that Coach Harbaugh made an appearance. And yet again, he's owning the expectations. He's not just owning them, he's dialing them up a notch. He is saying, hey, this is a special team. It's time to get over the hump. Time to win the Big Ten. Time to beat Ohio State, just like we saw at Big Ten Media Days, when Harbaugh said, hey, I think this is a special team, and I know the writers voted us first. That's where I would vote us as well. So I want to believe, as a Michigan fan, that one of the reasons we're seeing a more loquacious Jim Harbaugh this offseason is he actually thinks this year's team has the goods. And that's maybe the reason we didn't hear much the last couple of years. In 2017, he kind of knew, hey, we're a really young team right now, maybe the youngest team in the entire Power Five with all of those seniors. One returning starter, all those seniors gone to the NFL, 16 of them. One returning starter on the defensive side of the ball. Last year, remember, Shea Patterson wasn't granted immediate eligibility until May when the team was in France, which means you went through the entire spring when teams usually forge their identities without Michigan knowing, hey, is this going to be our field general or not? And then maybe you knew there might be a time period of immersion, of getting to know you. And then there was that opening game on the road in the prime time at Notre Dame where, great Michigan teams have gone into Notre Dame over the years and come out of there wounded with an L. So I want to believe that this year it is because he believes this year's team has what it takes to finally take things to the next level. Because here's what Ohio State and the inability to beat them. Here's what it's meant to the Michigan program under Jim Harbaugh, but then also historically. Under Jim Harbaugh, the Wolverines are 37-7 against everybody other than Ohio State and their bowl games. 37-7. That would be the second best win percentage in modern Big Ten history. It's like 845. That would be the second best win percentage in modern Big Ten history behind the 902 win percentage Urban Meyer just left Ohio State with. And if you want to know why Michigan tends to struggle in bowl games, well, if you look at Michigan's history, all time the Wolverines are just 7-16 in bowl games when they ended the regular season with a loss to the Buckeyes, 7-16. To put it another way, almost 2/3 of Michigan's bowl losses all time have come in seasons that ended with the ultimate downer, a loss to Ohio State. So historically, losing to Ohio State doesn't give Michigan the momentum it needs to go into the postseason, number one. But what it has meant for the Jim Harbaugh era is it has altered Michigan's trajectory into the postseason at all. It's been the reason that the Wolverines haven't yet been to Indianapolis under Jim Harbaugh. So, hey, he's right. It's time. But can you imagine what our reactions are going to be here in a few months? With Jimmy building up all this hype, if the Wolverines don't come through again, if they let us down that Saturday over Thanksgiving weekend against the Buckeyes again, can you imagine what that's going to feel like after the coach dialed up all these expectations? Here's my solution. Don't let that happen again. Now that football season is here, it's a great time to support Michigan Podcast via Patreon. We'd love to get over 100 patrons on Patreon by the time the season kicks off on August the 31st. And there's 3 ways that you can support us on Patreon. If you pledge $1 a month, that's just a great way, if you like our content, just to say thank you for putting this together for you all across the maize and blue landscape all year long. If you are in our exclusive club for $5 or more per month, then you get exclusive content. Like you can see, I recently posted my bestest bets for the college football season win totals in 2019. We will also have exclusive instant reaction podcast after games and other content that we set aside, like my point spread picks and others that we do for those of you that are supporting us at $5 a month. And then if you'd like to join our booster club, that's $25 or more a month. You also get your name and business mentioned in the credits, a shout out in the show as well. So a way to promote any message that you have, with some standards around here, obviously, or a business that you'd like us to promote for you as well, for just being a booster for $25 or more per month. And thank you to all of you that have been supporting us all year long as we head into our 3rd season on Michigan Podcast. All right, back here on Michigan Podcast, and I'm going to give away one of my little trade secrets as a college football idiot savant. There's a great website out there called Stasson. And I've been following this for years. And one of the things it does is it keeps track of the accuracy rate of a lot of your college football magazines. And so, collectively, since it debuted in 1995, Phil Steele's is usually rated, going back that far, the most accurate. Actually, in recent years, Athlon's has really picked up its game in terms of the accuracy of its forecasting. But if you go to this Stassen website right now, you're going to see something maybe some of you have never heard of called Pick Six Previews, as being the number one, currently ongoing, in the past few seasons, number one college football preview. Brett Ciancia is the mastermind behind Pick Six Previews, and I've got him with us here on this week's episode of Michigan Podcast. Brett, Steve Deace here. It's a pleasure to have you with us, man. How are you?
Hey, Steve. Yeah, great. Thanks for having me on. I'm excited to talk some Michigan and some Big Ten and some national.
First of all, tell us who you are, because I started doing this in high school. I was at a Michigan basketball camp, and I was complaining that I thought Lindy's had Michigan rated too low in its 1988 preview, coming off of the 8-4 season in '87. And a buddy of mine challenged me as a teenager, as a sophomore in high school, hey, if you think you can do a better job, do it. And so I wrote my own preview out by hand, and I picked Florida State to play West Virginia in the Fiesta Bowl for the national championship. And I got half of that right. I got West Virginia right, but I missed on Notre Dame. Okay. And I thought, wow, I'm 15 years old. This is easy. I'm going to do this the rest of my life. Well, I've been doing this, Brett. I'm now 46. I've been doing this every year since 1988. And I can promise you, it ain't easy. All right. And so who are you and what's your secret sauce?
Yeah. So I guess I had a similar background too, where I've been following along college football and the preview magazines every year. Kind of like a lot of people do office pools for March Madness. Me and my friends used to do a bowl pool, a bowl pick 'em. And for like 8 years in a row, I won every year. So finally my friends were like, hey, you got to do something with this. So I took a much deeper dive and really built out my knowledge base. And started putting out an annual preview. And like you mentioned at the top, since our launch in 2012, our Power 5 and BCS previews are rated the most accurate in America by Stassen.com. So that's a 7-year trend there. And this, our 8th season, I put together a large college football preview book. First time we've done a book, 1,500 words per team, tons of stat graphics. I developed some advanced stats. And really my background on this year's 2019 preview was just hundreds of hours of game tape. I watched spring games. I'm calling coaches and coordinators, listening into local podcasts such as Michigan Podcast. You guys are my go-to for Michigan content, but really getting into it on a local level, and then looking at some of my numbers and trends. So, it's a one-man operation over here. It's 1,000 hours I pumped into the season preview, and excited to talk about it.
Well, it looks great, first of all. I mean, calling coaches and coordinators – I wanted to be like the next Mel Kiper when I first started out. I'm like, this is a guy who had no athletic talent, just loved sports, and created a cottage industry based on his own analytical skills as an outsider. I kind of wanted to be Mel Kiper, just with maybe even better hair. Neither one of those worked out for me. When I hear you though talking about calling coaches and coordinators and breaking down game film, you're kind of following in Phil Steele's footsteps now, Brett.
Yeah, I guess so. And he does a great job. He covers all 130 teams, the group of 5 as well. I focused more in on the Power 5 leagues. And what kind of inspired me too was from reading these magazines year after year. I did think that maybe sometimes either due to print constraints or what have you, they sometimes didn't dig deep enough into a program. So I kind of put my own spin on the whole preseason preview product. I look more with some program history and program context. 10-year recruiting trends to see how the current staff is doing within their own program context. Advanced stats you'll see in there, but not too advanced too, because I do respect some of the analytic guys, but sometimes the metrics themselves become too complex or just too vague. So you got to bring it back to reality too. So I put it in knowledge, in easy to use terminology, so you can really understand what I'm talking about with the advanced stats. And so I tried to put my own spin on it, went a little bit deeper than the ones you'd see on newsstands, but also don't cover the group of 5, so you do miss that. But pretty confident with my product I put out this year.
I love the advanced stats, but I think, and I love what guys like Bill Connolly does, formerly at SB Nation, now at ESPN. But I think where we have to be careful with these advanced stats is they do a great job of telling us who a team is. I'm not so sure they're always accurate in telling us who a team is going to be, right? I mean, Lou Holtz used to say when he was at Notre Dame, one of his famous lines there is, as a college football coach, I'm coaching a different team every single week. Emotional up and downs, look ahead games, girlfriend problems, finals in the middle of a season. I'm coaching. He's like, I'm coaching a different team each and every week. You're certainly coaching a different team each and every year. And so that's where you have to be a little bit careful with advanced stats is I think they are valuable. I don't necessarily think they're prophetic. What are your thoughts on that, Brett?
Yeah, I agree with most of that. I think that, like I said, that advanced stats, they do have a nice place. They give you some numeric context, but really when it comes down to it, I mean, these are 21-year-old kids. The staff or the roster changes over every 4 years completely. So I think that some advanced metrics, I know Conley does a good job, but I think he weighs a little bit too much on the recruiting, the raw recruiting data, because one of the ways I stray away from that is because I think that, yes, recruiting matters. It's very important, but it's really just the first step. It really starts there. From there, it's up to the staff to really develop it and for the coaching schemes to take over and have, scheme advantages. And I really put that into words with my two formulas called player development and win conversion. They basically compare a team's recruiting trend over the past, 5 years and how they're converting that into either wins on the field or into NFL prospects to kind of put context on. Yeah, so USC, they recruited at a top 5 level, but it doesn't matter if they're not producing it or have competent schemes. They're losing games. They're not sending as many to the pros relatively. So that's my way of, yes, you start with recruiting, but then you kind of put it through these other formulas to see really what you have on hand. So, yeah, I think that advanced metrics they're important. They're interesting. But you need to get out and watch the game tape too. One last note on that is I saw after the Alabama-Clemson title game, the beatdown, that Bill Conley said that if they had a rematch, if they had 10 rematches, Alabama-Clemson, that he would pick Alabama all 10 times because his numbers told him. So, I mean, dude, you got to get out and watch the game a little bit too. Analytics are important, but you can't live in the numbers like that. You got to use your eyes a little bit too. So that's where I implemented all the game tape and the game study.
Brett Ciancia is here with us from Pick Six Previews on this week's episode of Michigan Podcast. Well, let's get to your preview, and let's start on a national level before we get to Michigan and the Big Ten. Because when people see your playoff picks, they're going to balk right away that there is a name missing from your projected Final Four, and that would be the Alabama Crimson Tide. Now, when I released my preview, and since high school, I've always done it more as a forecast than a preview, trying to predict how I think the season will end. And I had Utah just on the outside of making my Final Four in the playoff. And I thought, man, people are going to think I'm freaking nuts for doing that, right? Yeah. And then Phil Steele's magazine came out a couple of weeks later, and he's got him, I think, in the top 8 in his forecast. You've got Utah in the playoff in your forecast, so I wasn't any kind of edgy trailblazer at all. A lot of the analytics guys, such as yourself, you guys love Utah. You have Utah in the playoff and not Alabama. Let's start there. Explain yourself.
Yeah, sure. So really for the playoff with me, I kind of bring it down to a simpler term. I think that there's 4 spots and there's 5 leagues, so I try and find 4 conference champions that are most likely to end up with undefeated or 1 loss. So starting with that framework, Clemson I have as an easy number 1. I think there's no real challenger in the ACC for them this year. The number 2, I have Georgia actually beating Alabama this year. The last 2 times they played, they were extremely close, and actually, if you look at win probability numbers within the game, Georgia had a 95% chance in both games. That 2017 national title and then last year's SEC title game. I mean, it's not even a hot take to say they should have won both of those, or at least could have won both of those. And I think we'd be viewing Georgia a lot differently if they had stuck to what the numbers tell us there. So I have them finally breaking through. And then at the 3rd spot, which will upset a lot of your viewers, but we'll talk later about the Big Ten, is I do have Ohio State out of the Big Ten over Michigan in the East Division there. And then it came down to the 4th spot. And really, for me, that was down to either the Big 12 champion or the Pac-12 champion. And for me, whoever you think out of Oklahoma and Texas, I think the champion out of the Big 12 is going to finish with 2 or more losses. I think they're going to split the series head-to-head right away. And at least for Texas specifically, I think they'll lose to LSU. So for me, it came down to, you look at Utah, they have a lot of great stuff coming back. Very high on the defensive line. I have them number 1 in the nation defensive line-wise. A staff that in my metrics I talked about, player development and win conversion, they're top 5 in both categories. The Kyle Whittingham staff has a 10-year trend now of, yes, they recruit middle tier, but they're producing tons of NFL players and stout defenses every year. Couple that with a 4-year starter at quarterback, a 4-year starter at running back, and all the receiver production back. And then the last bit on that was the schedule, where they actually miss out of the cross-division schedule in the Pac-12. They actually missed Oregon and Stanford. So a great schedule boost, and a manageable non-conference slate. And I think that they're more likely to go either 13-0 or 12-1 than the Big 12 champs. So that's how I arrived at this prediction. I'm getting a ton of feedback, as you can imagine, on Twitter about it. But I think once I lay the logic out there, it sounds more reasonable. And to Alabama fans that might be tuning in, yes, I think that if you were in the Pac-12 South, you'd go undefeated as well. But Utah doesn't have to go through LSU, A&M, the SEC title game with Georgia, even the Mississippi team. So my rankings are what I think will happen on December 1st, not September 1st. If that makes sense. Yep,
that's the same way I do my preview as well. It is done by what I think the final regular season rankings are going to be. In this case, in this era now, it's the college football playoff rankings. You and I don't differ that much. We actually our numbers, analytics, the way we do this came to a lot of the same conclusions in general, just with a couple of differences. Like, I don't think Utah will go undefeated, but I'm very high on them. I also have Georgia beating Alabama in the SEC championship game. People forget.
Yeah, you have the number one, right?
Yeah, and I think they'll finish number one if they do that. Because people forget, Georgia led that game 28-14 and was in total control of the game. And then Kirby Smart got outside himself and decided, you know what, I'm gonna pull what Nick did when I was on the staff against Deshaun Watson in the BCS or the playoff national championship game and throw a fake punt out there. Well, the difference was Saban ran with an onside kick because he recognized his defense wasn't stopping Deshaun Watson that night. He needed another possession. All right. Kirby had total control of that game. And you throw Justin Fields out there on your punt fake team. And that's where Nick Saban's like, I had to have coached this guy better than to make this so obvious, right? I mean, it can't be this obvious. Yeah. I wonder if he almost psyched Nick Saban out with that, with Nick was like, I know Kirby's not this dumb to think I will fall for this, so I wonder if it's a trick within a trick, right? Well, that botched fake punt changed that entire game. And really changed the entire complexion of both teams' seasons of what would have happened. So I have Alabama in the playoff in place of Utah. I have Clemson and Georgia. And I have Michigan instead of Ohio State. Now, here's the thing for me. I love the Wolverines. I like being right more than anything else in life, though. Except my God and my family. I hear you. So for me, I actually think Michigan's going to be about what they were last year. I predicted Michigan to go 10-2 last year, and they did. I'm predicting them to go 10-2 this year. I think the defense will take a bit of a step back. I don't think it'll fall outside the top 20 nationally, but I don't think it'll be a top 3 unit as it has been every year under Don Brown. I think the offense, though, will take a massive step forward. But for me, my Michigan prediction is actually more about Ohio State. There's a trend in the coaches poll, which doesn't matter, but this is an interesting trend nonetheless. 26 out of the last 30 years, a team ranked in the top 10, at least one of them, has not finished in the top 25. And in the AP poll, on average, historically, about 2.5 teams in the AP top 10 preseason poll don't finish the year ranked. And if you look last year, there were 3 teams that were ranked in the coaches poll preseason top 10 that didn't finish the season ranked. Wisconsin was one, Auburn was one, and I'm forgetting who the other one was. And all 3 of them had the same thing in common. A lack of proven quarterback depth and or offensive line problems. The quarterback depth killed Wisconsin. Auburn's offensive line was atrocious, which is why I find it funny. Everybody keeps talking about when they bring back all 5 starters. Those same 5 starters sucked last year and almost got Jarrett Stidham killed and Gus Malzahn fired. Now, maybe they'll be better, but they weren't very good last year. When I look at the teams in this year's top 10, there's actually only one team that I can point to that says that has a lack of quarterback depth and a questionable offensive line. And it's actually Ohio State. I mean, they've got primordial ooze behind Justin Fields, who's playing in an entirely different offense. He was in a pro-style attack before. And behind him is the backup quarterback at Kentucky, when a lot of people thought Terry Kirby was the worst starting quarterback in the SEC last year, and Gunnar Hoke was his backup. And then you throw in 4 new starters on the offensive line. Now, I don't think there's much of a chance, barring Justin Fields blowing a knee or an Achilles in week 2, that Ohio State isn't going to finish as a top 25 team. There's way too much talent everywhere else. But when you have a lack of quarterback depth, and it's a system where he's going to have to run, Brett. I mean, he's not Dwayne Haskins. He's going to have to run the football, and you're going to take a lot of punishment running the ball with your quarterback in this league, where you have 8 teams in ESPN's preseason power ratings right now. So you've got an unproven quarterback who has to run. That's a part of his game, and there's nobody behind him. And then you throw in 4 new starters on the offensive line. This is more about, I believe there's no way Ohio State will maintain the pace it had under Urban Meyer. Keep in mind, he had a .902 win percentage at Ohio State. And if I just flip the script on 3 games that could have gone either way, Maryland last year, Michigan in 2016, Penn State in 2017, where they came back and won by 1 point.
Yeah.
If you just flip those 3 games, he doesn't win a single Big Ten championship at Ohio State, which just goes to show the margin for error that Ryan Day has. So it's more about, I don't think Michigan's that much better. I think they're about what they were last year. Just the offense is more ahead of the defense. I just think Ohio State has way too many question marks. How do you respond to that?
Well, yeah, that was a good breakdown. There's a lot to respond to. Well, first off, I think that, no, I'm not viewing it as a biased pick by you putting Michigan 4. I think there's a lot of logic behind it, and no one knows their team better than you who covers them. So I think it's an honest take. I actually had Michigan in the playoff last year. I predicted last year out of nowhere that I'd have Ohio State and Michigan both in the top 4 in the Final Four bracket. And really, it came closer than people thought. I mean, if Michigan takes care of business in that opener against Notre Dame, and then if Oklahoma's 2-point conversion try against Oklahoma State goes bad, you're looking at both Michigan and Ohio State finishing with 1 loss, and I think they would have been the 2 in the playoffs. So it was close. According to my game grader formula, Michigan was a top 4 team last year. They finished 4th overall. And up until that blowout, well, I guess the 2 blowouts to end the season, they were top 3. So this was a playoff caliber team last year. First, with Michigan's defense, I think that, so disclosure, I'm a Boston College alum. So,
you know Anthony Campanile and Don Brown both, yes.
Oh, yeah. You know where I'm going with that, right?
Yep.
So Don Brown, despite having maybe top 80 talent, I mean, nothing notable up there. They can't recruit up there. With a lower talent pool, he was able to churn out a number 2 defense in 2015. And every year the defense there under him was very stout.
Weren't they number 1 defensively one year, and you guys were 3-9, something like that under Don Brown?
That's the year I'm referencing. Yeah. Number 1 or number 2. Yeah, they were incredible on defense and still couldn't even finish the winning record. So yeah, I have a ton of respect for Don Brown. I think that he'll reload. He doesn't rebuild; he reloads. Lose some star power. You lose Chase Winovich, Rashawn Gary, Devin Bush, Aubrey Solomon, a former 5-star, is gone. But really, when you break down the D line a little bit, I think that Rashawn Gary a little underachieved a little bit, and I think that you have some guys ready to step in that I don't think the defensive line will really miss a beat. It's just the overall, I guess, experience level on the linebackers. But people forget about Khaliki Hudson. Ready for a comeback season at linebacker there. So anyways, I'm rambling a little bit. I think the defense will be fine. I don't think it'll stay top 3 like it's been. I think it'll still be, like you said, a top 20 unit. Offense, I think you're a little bit higher on than I am with Michigan. I'm a little bit worried about the scheme change. I guess it does play into their strengths. I know the receiver core might be the best you've had there since probably the Lloyd Carr days. I mean, that thing is loaded. Donovan Peoples-Jones. You even get Tariq Black back from injury. Nico Collins, I think he's going through a little bit of injury too, but he'll be back. And then the emergence of Mike Sanristel, who I guess those first 3 names I mentioned were more outside receivers and kind of proven commodities, but to have this inside slot guy all of a sudden really breaks us into an elite unit. And he's getting the most freshman receiver hype out of here since Steve Preston. So excited there. The offensive line is incredible. I mean, there's really no flaws there. You can go 4 guys are all American quality or all Big Ten quality for sure. So I'm really high on those 2 units. Shea Patterson, yeah, I think he's a great player. I want to see him in this new system. It's still an unknown to me. Because Michigan historically has been that under center, power I, or I guess I formation, power run game, the traditional Big Ten offense. So to hear, I remember hearing rumors about, we're going to modernize, we're going to bring in Josh Gaddis. You hear that a lot from teams where, we're going to quote unquote modernize. I know the Ferences at Iowa say that every year, and they still bring out their caveman offense. So, but I watched the spring game in Michigan. I did see that they were implementing it all the way. I saw, you saw no huddle. They were looking over to the sidelines for the play calls. A lot of up-tempo stuff, shotgun almost every play, which was weird to see for Michigan. But yeah, so I think they are going through with it. I think that it's a good experiment. It's definitely uncertainty to me. Now we flip over to Ohio State. People right away will knock the coaching change, and I think there will be definitely some transition there. But we did see almost a whole month of Ryan Day's Ohio State program last September during the suspension, and they played 3 great games. They beat a talented TCU team before they started getting injured, and you saw his impact on the offense. He moved them from what was a 65-35% run-heavy offense with Urban Meyer, a lot of quarterback power with J.T. Barrett those years. He moved that more towards a 50-50 balance, which actually trended a little bit pass-heavy with Dwayne Haskins, and really got his playmakers into open space and got the ball. I'm sure you remember that, obviously, the Michigan game. Those crosser routes are brutal with their speed. So I love their talent at running back and receiver. The offensive line, sure, it is a concern, but you need to remember that they have recruited almost at an Alabama level. It's really Alabama 1, Georgia 2, and then Ohio State a definite 3 nationally the last 5 years. So it's a little bit of blind faith, but I know that there has been some strong recruiting there, and that hasn't just disappeared overnight. So I think they'll be able to replace some of those starters. Certainly not as much of a certainty as Michigan's O-line, but I don't think that it's something to throw them out of the top 10 about. And then defensively, this is really where I moved Ohio State into a Big Ten champ level from a 9 or 10 win team was the defense. Because yes, last year it had issues. There's no mistaking it. It wasn't just the Purdue game either. You could have seen the warnings coming where they gave up multiple 80-yard runs to Oregon State, 500 yards at TCU. They let McSorley scramble all over them. And then finally against Purdue, the levee broke down. But really what it was to me was it was too complex of a scheme. The linebackers at times looked really slow. They were hesitant. They weren't really just playing freely. And what they did here, bringing in actually a couple Michigan coaches with Greg Madison and out Washington, they're throwing that complex playbook, Schiano's playbook, out the window. They're saying, you know what, we're not doing that. We're going to let our talent play. We're going to let our guys play freely, run around the field. And I think you're going to see that. I think you're going to see more speed, less thinking, and just more action. So I'm actually really excited with the defense there. They're top 10 in returning production, so everything's back. So that's where I am with Ohio State. The last question mark really is a quarterback. I felt a lot better about this back in March and April. Then I saw the spring game.
He was brutal in the spring game.
Yeah,
brutal.
Yeah, I know. You see the one highlight like, he threw that one long ball. But, yeah, that was a terribly underthrown pass, and it was a great play by the receiver. I'm a little bit worried after seeing that. And then to have Matthew Baldwin, the backup transfer, you're right, there's no depth there behind him. And all we really saw of Justin Fields last year was him in somewhat of a wildcat package at Georgia. For whatever reason, Kirby Smart and the offensive staff there didn't really let him air the ball out much. It was basically a running back at quarterback. I did have the chance to speak with Ohio State wide receivers coach Brian Hartline, and he talked about Justin Fields being, incredibly elusive in the pocket. He's creative back there, but he's really this spring. He said that he was trying to work more on his downfield passing and being more patient in the pocket, to the point that the staff was saying, "Hey, Justin, if there's room there, if there's grass there, take off and run." But he's really, I guess, trying to hone in on his passing. But that could be some coach speak, and we'll have to wait and see there. So it is certainly a question mark. But I guess I'm just going off of elite recruiting. They do pretty well at player development and win conversion, and it's not a total uncertainty with Ryan Day on offense, because we did see a great improvement on offense last year. So that's where I fell out with that. So, but not to knock Michigan, I still have the top 10, and I think that game will decide everything.
I mean, I'd have been fine if you would have told me I just can't pick them to beat Ohio State until I actually see it. I'd have been fine with that. But you gave me a lot more than I bargained for, which is why we were glad to have you here with us.
Well, I think that is a line in my book there. I think I do say that until it happens.
I don't have a problem with anybody having that analysis.
That's a better answer, right? Yeah.
I don't know that it's a better answer, but it's sufficient. And you listen, you have to lecture me. I'm the Michigan fan. I've lived through these last 15 years. No one from the outside has to give me the I'm from Missouri, you have to show me line. I've endured these last 15 years. I get it. When you look at across I want to ask you about this nationally and then in the Big Ten. So the answer probably is Utah nationally. Who do you, even though they just got voted the league favorite by the league's media, but who do you like? So maybe they don't count anymore. Is there somebody other than Utah that you like better than kind of the conventional wisdom heading into the season does nationally?
Oh, sure, yeah. So, well, it's funny you said at the beginning you were saying how you thought that you were high on Utah, and then other publications came out and ended up being mild. Same thing for me with Nebraska, actually. Back in November, I started looking into my game grader formula and saying, man, these numbers just don't match up. This is way better than a 4-win team. And then you get the second-year coach bonus with Scott Frost coming back. So back in November, I was like, wow, this could be a nice top 20 team. Like, I think I'm onto something here. I found a gem. And then the publications come out. Everyone's got them top 15. And, it makes my top 20 pick look kind of mild. So that's a similar case. But, no, a team that I'm very high on relative to the national media would be TCU. In fact, I don't think they're actually pre-ranked. But to me, I have the number 16 in the country. It's an example of a team that just got pounded with injuries last year. Some of the most injuries I've ever seen. They were onto a fourth-string quarterback, a walk-on guy, and it really was an uncharacteristic team. Yeah, Gary Patterson and his defensive staff have such a track record. Now they get a ton of players back. They finally have 4-star, 5-star talent at quarterback. It's just a matter of who emerges. The running back stable is really full. Receivers are great. But yeah, it's really just this 4-2-5 defense, this scheme that's kind of a differentiator for TCU in the pass-heavy and offense-heavy Big 12. They go at it with their defense. And I think that there's a lot to be excited about there. They have all the parts. So, yes, they had a losing record last year, but I think they're going to surprise a lot of folks, and I have them third in the Big 12. I think that their consensus may be fifth or sixth in the Big 12, so that's 2 or 3 spots higher than the national average there. Who else? Texas I have a little bit higher than everyone else. Everyone has Oklahoma as just,
Yeah, I think we're going too far. I was on board at first, early in the offseason with Texas. It isn't quite back. They need another year of recruiting, but they could maybe win the Big 12. But now we're getting to the point now where I'm seeing stuff where they're ranked 18th, not in the top 25. And I'm like, guys, I know they lost a ton on defense, but we do remember what league they play in, right? Okay.
Yeah, exactly. They lost a lot of. Yeah, people point right to the returning starters and returning production metric, but really look at who's replacing them. Tom Herman has back-to-back top 3 classes of recruiting, and I know that Texas the last decade has really underperformed their recruiting rank and their national perception. But guess what, guys? That wasn't Tom Herman. That was past staffs. You got to look at what this staff has done, Texas or elsewhere. I mean, you talk about Tom Herman leading that 2014 Ohio State offense, bringing the vertical pass game, and end up going for the national title that year, and then goes down to Houston and beats Oklahoma as a non-Power 5 team. So now you have your third-year bonus here with Tom Herman, and I think you're going to see all his young blue-chip talent really rise to the top. So I have him 7th. I have him winning the Big 12. I don't think anyone else has that. I'm worried with Oklahoma's offensive line going through a changeover. Watch their spring game.
I have them winning the Big 12. I have them losing to Oklahoma in the regular season and then beating Oklahoma in the Big 12 championship game. And I agree with you. I think they're going to lose to LSU early in the year. That's where I think they're going to really feel those defensive numbers when a more physical team at the line of scrimmage comes in early in the season.
Yeah, I worry about that too. I think that's a loss for them. But the knock on Oklahoma for me is they lose 4 out of 5 of their offensive line, a unit that won the Moore Award last year, which goes to the top unit. 4 out of 5 are gone. Yes, they bring in Jalen Hurts, but I watched that spring game. He was running around like crazy every snap. He had no time to set his feet and throw. I think the offensive line is a serious issue there. And defensively, my gosh, I mean, they're giving up 50 points a game or whatever it was. So I'm not so sold on the defense either. So I think that, all their they had a lot of razor thin wins too. A 2-point conversion against Oklahoma State, 3-point win against West Virginia. So I think a lot of those start to reverse. And I think that this is the year that they fall from the Big 12 title.
Final thing, when you put it all to bed, and I look back at my preview, and when I put it to bed, and I'm like, if I'm wrong, this is where I'm going to be wrong the most. Okay, and when you look at and for me, it's Northwestern. If I'm wrong, they're going to be the team I think that's going to pull my pants down. If Hunter Johnson, we're talking about recruits and recruiting rankings. I mean, Hunter Johnson was rated higher than Tua Tagovailoa in the same class. If Hunter Johnson is any kind of player close to that rep at all, I have their front 7 defensively rated the second best in the Big Ten behind Michigan State's. If the schedule for Northwestern is easier than it was last year as well. So that's the team where I know right now, if I'm wrong, it's going to be my man crush, Pat Fitzgerald, proves me wrong yet again. Who is it when you look at the Big Ten and you look at what you finally came up with? What's where's the burr in the saddle? If we have you on again in November when it's all over and look back and do some reconciliation, when we look at the Big Ten, you're going to be like, that's the one I should have seen coming and I was wrong about.
In the Big Ten specifically?
Yes. Yeah.
Oof. Well, I guess you start with Ohio State and Michigan. That flip right there. I mean, if Justin Fields comes out and he hasn't progressed from what we saw last year, that's a serious issue at quarterback and what seems to be more of a pass-heavy, or at least balanced compared to what there used to be at quarterback. So that one would look bad. Nebraska, I guess we are putting a little bit of blind faith in them. They've gone 4-8 the past 2 years. They've underperformed against their recruiting the last decade plus. I saw your stat, which, by the way, that was a great trends you put out. Those stats and trends, like kind of unique facts. Mm-hmm. The one about how Nebraska every year since 2003 has had 4 or more losses. If they can't get it together, it could be another year.
They've only finished in the top 50 in total defense, Brett, one time in the last 5 years. Once.
Jeez. Yeah, that's incredible. It's incredible because you look back at just decades of dominance.
Right.
It's been eroded. So you wonder if Scott Frost can bring them back. I think they can to at least the top 20 level, but that would be a bad prediction on my part. The one national in this category would really be Utah. I mean, I'm kind of putting my chips on Utah. It's one of those that's making the rounds on Twitter just because of how, Utah is not really a brand name. It's more so that I'm taking the Pac-12 champ to come out of there with one loss, not so much that I think Utah would beat Alabama right now. But yeah, so that one's really getting a lot of attention. So I'm a little bit worried about that opener against BYU. I mean, I'd hate to be sitting there on that Thursday night, the opener, and see my playoff pick get a loss. So I'm already getting nervous about that holy war, they call it. So, yeah, we'll see. I mean, it's a time of year where everyone's right and a lot of pressure on our picks. I always get asked, like, what's your favorite team? It's really who I pick that year because I want to just look good, kind of like what you said at the top. So, hey, I'm a huge Utah fan this year every Saturday.
Brett, it's been great having you with us. A lot of great information. How can people get your Pick 6 preview?
Yeah, thanks for having me, Steve. And it's been a great follow on Twitter, and I enjoyed reading through your book as well. To the listeners there, so Pick 6 Previews, the Twitter handle is @Pick 6 Previews. It's all spelled out, all one word. And the website is pick6previews.com. And on there, you'll find our season preview where it's all 65 Power 5 teams, 1,500 words per team, about 3 times what you'd see on newsstands in terms of content. Tons of stat graphics, tons of trends, and kind of put a different angle on the whole preseason publication product. And as I'd like to extend out a discount code to your Michigan fans. I can tell that it's a passionate bunch. I actually made it out to Ann Arbor for the 2013 Nebraska game. I know it went the bad way for you guys.
Yeah, that was a UGLY, you ain't got no alibi, you ugly performance by Michigan. Yeah.
Yeah. It was low scoring. I think Amir Abdullah had a diving touchdown to take the lead.
Yep.
But anyways, it was great meeting a lot of you out there. I know it's been a few years, but a very knowledgeable fan base, a ton of history up there. So as a way to give back to you for having me on and for your listeners, just type in Michigan at the checkout and you'll get a nice discount there if you're interested in checking out my book. And appreciate you having me on.
You bet. Michigan is the discount code, and it's pick6previews.com. That's the website?
Yes, pick6previews.com, and you'll see the link for 2019 season preview book. It's in huge font. So, and also the Twitter has it every day over there.
Well, folks, imagine if Phil Steele wrote a magazine that was readable. Okay.
Yeah.
All right? I mean, I am wearing stylish bifocals. I cannot freaking read Phil Steele's magazine.
It's kind of like computer code. No, he kind of writes in computer code.
Yeah, he's learned to code, obviously. All right, so imagine Phil Steele's what you love about his magazine in a far more readable form, and that's what I think this is, and that's pretty high praise given the high regard that Phil has. So, Brett Ciancia, it's been great having you with us. Again, pick6previews.com and use the promo code Michigan, and you'll get a discount on this preview. Brett, we'll definitely do this again sometime, man. Take care. God bless.
Yeah, thanks, Steve. Good luck to Michigan this year.
Thank you. Hey, if you want to keep up with what we think about Michigan athletics all week long in between episodes of Michigan Podcast, check out our website at wolverinedigest.com. For example, we've got a brand new story up there looking at all of the potential starting fives in the Big Ten now that Franz Wagner's in the fold for the Wolverines, and you can see where Michigan stacks up against the rest of the conference. There's ways to keep up with our coverage of the football team, basketball. We've added hockey and baseball as well. So a ton of stuff that you can follow along with here. And we have a video each and every morning we put up as a way of just saying kind of good morning and catching you up on whatever the big news was from overnight for the Michigan Wolverines. So you can follow us on the website, Recruiting 2, at wolverinedigest.com. This week's Twitter poll results, we asked, are you in favor of a Big Ten realignment that eliminates divisions in football? 72% of you said yes, which I believe is the correct answer. In fact, on a future episode, we're going to talk about why I am heavily in favor of that format, and I think it'd be a big boost to the Big Ten. That brings us to this week's question of the week. It comes from Perry. Is Michigan comfortable not being an elite team, not making the playoff, or beating Ohio State? No. Thanks for watching this week's episode of Michigan Podcast and for tuning in via the podcast. If you're listening on Google Play, iTunes, Stitcher, watching on YouTube, whatever is the vehicle platform of your choice, remember, like, subscribe, 5-star review, whatever the case on that particular platform may be. Help us to spread the word about what we're doing here on Michigan Podcast. You can also read our stuff all week long at wolverinedigest.com. Follow us on Twitter at Michigan Podcast, and a special thanks to our friends at Detroit Sports Podcast for helping to get the word out about what we do here each week on the Michigan Podcast. Until the next time, which will be next week, go Blue.